The SUV flipped once, twice, then vanished into the white wall of snow. Arland Hayes stood frozen on the roadside, his breath caught somewhere between his chest and throat. For 3 seconds, he was back in that other storm, watching metal crumple and lights fade while sirens wailed too late. His wife had waited. No one came. He ran. Not because he was brave, not because he knew what he'd find. He ran because he remembered what it felt like to die alone in the cold, waiting for help that never arrived. Can he save someone this time, or will he witness a repeat of the tragedy? The snow had been falling since dawn, thick and relentless, the kind that erased roads and swallowed sound. Arland Hayes had driven these mountain routes for years, knew every curve and dip by memory, but today the world had turned into a blank page. He gripped the wheel tighter, squinting through the windshield as the wipers fought a losing battle against the storm. He shouldn't have been out here. Rowan was home with Mrs. Callahan from next door, probably building another fort out of couch cushions or begging for a third round of hot chocolate. The boy was 8 now, old enough to understand when his father had to leave for a few hours, young enough to still ask when he'd be back. Arland always came back. That was the promise he made after Emma died. He would always come back. The supply run to town had taken longer than expected. The hardware store was nearly empty, shelves picked clean by people smarter than him who'd stocked up before the storm hit. He'd managed to grab what he needed, firewood, batteries, canned soup, and started the drive home before the roads became impassable. The radio had been warning about whiteout conditions for the past hour, urging people to stay indoors. He was almost there, just another 10 miles. That's when he saw the tire marks. They carved a violent arc across the road, fresh enough that snow hadn't yet filled them in. Arland's foot hit the brake instinctively, his truck sliding slightly before the tires caught. He followed the tracks with his eyes, watched them veer off the shoulder and disappear down the embankment. His stomach dropped. The SUV had flipped. He could see it now, a dark shape barely visible through the curtain of white, resting on its side like a dying animal. Steam or smoke rose from the engine, dissipating instantly in the wind. No one else was on the road, no headlights in either direction. Just him and the wreckage and the storm that seemed to grow louder by the second. For a moment, Arland couldn't move. His hand stayed locked on the wheel, his breath coming short and fast. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Emma's car, the twisted metal, the way the snow had looked almost peaceful as it settled on the shattered glass. He'd been too late then, 20 minutes too late. The paramedics said she'd died on impact, but he knew better. He knew she'd been alone in those final moments, waiting for someone to find her. His door was open before he realized he'd made the decision. The cold slammed into him, stealing the air from his lungs, but he was already moving. His boots sank into snow up to his shins as he half ran, half stumbled down the embankment. The wind screamed in his ears. He couldn't feel his face. The SUV was worse up close. The driver's side was crushed against the ground, the windshield spiderwebbed, but somehow still intact. Arland circled to the passenger side, now facing skyward, and peered through the window. A woman lay crumpled in the driver's seat, held in place by her seatbelt, her head tilted at an angle that made his chest tighten. Blood streaked her temple. Her eyes were closed. He pounded on the window. "Hey, can you hear me?" Nothing. Arland tried the door, but it was locked. He looked around frantically, spotted a rock half buried in snow, and grabbed it. 3 strikes and the window shattered. He reached in, fumbling for the lock, and yanked the door open. Cold air rushed into the vehicle. The woman stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, and she made a sound, somewhere between a groan and a whimper. Alive. She was alive. "Okay," Arland said, more to himself than to her. "Okay, you're okay." He assessed the situation quickly. The seatbelt had probably saved her life, but now it was pinning her at an awkward angle, He couldn't tell if anything was broken. Moving her could make things worse, but leaving her here was out of the question. The storm was only getting stronger, and even if he called for help, no ambulance was making it up this mountain tonight. He unclipped the seatbelt and caught her as she slumped forward. She was lighter than he expected, dressed in clothes that belonged in a boardroom, not a blizzard. Tailored coat, leather gloves, heels that were completely impractical. He maneuvered her out of the vehicle as carefully as he could, his muscles straining with the effort. She didn't wake, but her breathing was steady. That had to be enough. Getting her up the embankment was harder. The snow had turned his tracks into slick trenches, and twice he nearly lost his footing. By the time he reached his truck, his arms were shaking, and his lungs burned from the cold. He laid her across the back seat, tucking his own jacket around her, then climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. The heater roared to life. Arland glanced at her in the rearview mirror. In the dim light, he could see her face more clearly now. Mid-30s maybe. Sharp features, the kind that looked used to control. Even unconscious, there was something composed about her, like she was used to holding everything together. Her purse had fallen to the floor of the SUV. He'd grabbed it on instinct, and now he rifled through it, looking for ID. Mara Lennox. The name was printed on a sleek business card tucked into her wallet. CEO, Lennox Enterprises. He didn't recognize the company, but the title told him enough. This woman lived in a different world than he did, one where storms were inconveniences handled by assistants and backup plans. Out here, though, none of that mattered. He pulled back onto the road, or what he thought was the road. Visibility was near zero now, and the GPS on his phone had lost signal miles ago. Home was out of the question. Too far, too dangerous. But there was another option. The old cabin his father used to own, tucked back in the woods about 3 miles west. Arland hadn't been there in over a year, but it would have 4 walls and a roof, maybe some firewood left in the shed. It would have to do. The drive took 20 minutes that felt like an hour. The truck's tires spun uselessly more than once, and he had to reverse and try different angles to keep moving forward. When the cabin finally appeared through the trees, he felt a rush of relief so strong it almost made him dizzy. It looked smaller than he remembered, half buried in snow, but the door still opened when he kicked it. Inside was cold and dark and smelled like old wood, but it was shelter. That was all that mattered. Arland carried Mara inside and laid her on the single bed in the corner. There was no electricity, but he found matches and a kerosene lamp in the cupboard, along with a few dusty blankets in a trunk by the wall. He started a fire in the wood stove, coaxing the flames until they caught and held. Warmth began to seep into the room, slow but steady. He sat on the floor near the stove, his back against the wall, and watched her breathe. She hadn't woken yet. He didn't know if that was good or bad. Outside, the storm hammered against the cabin walls, furious and indifferent. They were trapped here now. Both of them. He'd saved her life, maybe. Or maybe he'd only delayed the inevitable. Arland closed his eyes and thought of Rowan. Mrs. Callahan would keep him safe. She had to. Mara woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of wind trying to tear the world apart. Her eyes opened slowly, vision blurred, and head pounding. The ceiling above her was wooden, unfamiliar, crossed with beams that looked like they'd been there since before she was born. She tried to sit up, and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through her ribs, sharp enough to steal her breath. She pressed a hand to her side and felt the rough fabric of a blanket she didn't recognize. Where was she? The last thing she remembered was the steering wheel spinning uselessly in her hands, the SUV tilting, gravity turning cruel. Then nothing, just darkness and the distant sound of her own heartbeat. She turned her head carefully and saw him. A man sitting across the room, silhouetted against the glow of a fire burning in what looked like an old wood stove. He was watching her, his posture tense, like he wasn't sure whether she was going to scream or pass out again. Mara's instinct was to do both. Instead, she forced her voice to work. "Who are you?" The man didn't move. "Arland Hayes. You crashed. I pulled you out." His tone was flat, factual. No emotion. That steadied her somehow, made the situation feel less like a nightmare and more like something she could navigate. She took inventory of herself, bruised, cold, but alive. Her coat was gone. So were her heels. Someone had covered her with blankets, plural, and there was a damp cloth on the small table beside the bed that looked like it had been used to clean the blood from her temple. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice steadier now. "Old cabin, about 3 miles off the main road. Storm's too bad to get you anywhere else." Mara processed this. She looked toward the single window, but it was black outside, snow piling against the glass. The wind howled like something alive. She'd been in board meetings that felt less hostile than this room. "You should have left me," she said, though she didn't mean it. Arland's expression didn't change. Couldn't. That single word hung between them, heavy with something unspoken. Mara studied him more closely. He looked like someone who'd stopped caring about appearances a long time ago. Worn flannel, jeans with mud on the knees, hands that had seen work. His face was weathered, tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. Mid-40s maybe, the kind of man who fixed things because no one else would. She sat up slowly, biting back a groan, and swung her legs over the side of the bed. The floor was freezing against her bare feet. "Easy," Arland said, standing. He crossed the room in 3 steps and crouched beside her, close enough that she could see the concern in his eyes, despite the guarded tone. "You hit your head pretty hard. Could have a concussion." "I'm fine," Mara said automatically. "You're not." The certainty in his voice irritated her. She didn't need someone telling her what she was or wasn't. She'd spent the last 15 years building a company from nothing, surviving board coups and hostile takeovers, and competitors who smiled while sharpening knives. A car accident and a headache weren't going to stop her. But when she tried to stand, her legs buckled. Arland caught her before she hit the floor, his grip firm but not rough. For a moment, she was too close to him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off his body, close enough to realize just how cold she actually was. "Let me help," he said quietly. Mara wanted to refuse. She wanted to snap at him, push him away, prove that she didn't need anyone. But the truth was, she could barely stand. So she let him guide her back to the bed, hating every second of it. He stepped back once she was seated, giving her space. "There's soup," he said, nodding toward a pot sitting on the stove. "Canned, but it's hot." She wasn't hungry, but she nodded anyway. Arland ladled some into a chipped mug and brought it to her. She took it, wrapping her hands around the ceramic, letting the heat seep into her fingers. The first sip burned her tongue, but she didn't care. It was the first thing that had felt real since she woke up. They didn't talk while she ate. Arland returned to his spot by the stove, feeding it another log, then sat back down. The fire crackled and popped, the only sound besides the wind. Mara finished the soup and set the mug aside, her mind starting to work again, cataloging the situation. No phone signal, no power, no way out until the storm passed. She glanced at Arland and wondered what kind of man drove into a blizzard to save a stranger. An idiot, probably. Or someone with nothing left to lose. "You live up here?" she asked. "Not anymore. Used to come here with my dad when I was a kid. And now? Now I live down the mountain, have a son." Mara's stomach tightened. "How old?" 8. She did the math. He'd left a child at home to pull her out of a wreck. She didn't know what to do with that information, so she filed it away and moved on. "He'll be fine," Arland added, like he could read her thoughts. "Neighbors with him. She knows to keep him safe." Mara nodded, though she didn't understand. She'd never had to worry about someone waiting for her at home. Her father had died when she was 16, and after that, it had just been her. No siblings, no close friends. No one who'd notice if she didn't come back from a business trip. That was the price of power. You climbed high enough, and eventually you climbed alone. "Thank you," she said, the words stiff and unfamiliar, "for pulling me out." Arland looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Don't mention it." But she could tell it had cost him something. She could see it in the way his shoulders stayed tense, the way his eyes flickered to the window every few minutes, like he was expecting something terrible to happen. This man was afraid, not of the storm, but of something else. Something she didn't understand yet. The hours crawled by. The storm didn't let up. Mara tried to sleep but couldn't. Her head throbbed, and every time she closed her eyes, she felt the SUV tipping again, felt the world spinning out of control. So she stayed awake, watching the fire, watching Arland, trying to make sense of the strange limbo they'd fallen into. Around what she guessed was midnight, the temperature dropped. She could feel it in her bones, a cold that seeped through the blankets and settled in her chest. She pulled them tighter, but it didn't help. Her teeth started to chatter. Arland noticed. He always seemed to notice. "Fire's not enough," he said, standing. He grabbed another blanket from the trunk and brought it to her, draping it over her shoulders. It helped, but only barely. "Still cold?" he asked. "I'm fine," she lied. He didn't believe her. She could see it in the way he looked at her, the way his jaw tightened. He glanced at the door, then back at her, then at the fire. She could practically see him running through options in his head. "We need to share body heat," he said finally, the words coming out like he was confessing to a crime. Mara stared at him. "What?" "You're going into shock. I can see it. If your core temperature drops too much." I said I'm fine. "You're not." There it was again. That certainty. That infuriating, unbearable certainty. Arland crossed his arms. "Look, I know this isn't. I know it's not ideal. But we don't have a choice. The storm's getting worse, and this cabin wasn't built for weather like this. If you want to survive the night, you need to stay warm." Mara's pride screamed at her to refuse. She was Mara Lennox. She didn't need help. She didn't need anyone. But her body was betraying her, shaking so hard now that she couldn't hide it. And somewhere beneath the layers of armor she'd spent years building, a small, terrified voice whispered that he was right. "Fine," she said, the word barely audible. Arland nodded, his face carefully blank. He moved to the bed, sitting on the edge, then laying down on top of the blankets, keeping as much distance between them as the narrow mattress allowed. He pulled one of the blankets over both of them, creating a shared cocoon of warmth. Mara lay rigid beside him, every muscle locked. She could feel the heat coming off him, could hear his breathing, steady and controlled. It was the most intimate she'd been with another person in years, and it terrified her more than the crash had. "Relax," Arland said quietly. "You're burning energy you don't have." "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Do what?" "Be weak." Arland didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was softer than she expected. "It's not weakness. It's survival." Mara turned her head slightly. Looking at him in the dim firelight, his eyes were fixed on the ceiling, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hand stayed carefully at his sides. "You're scared," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah." "Of what?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, finally, he spoke. My wife died 3 years ago. Car accident. Storm like this one. Mara's breath caught. Suddenly, everything made sense. The way he'd hesitated before pulling her from the SUV. The way he looked at her like she was a ghost. The way he'd said he couldn't leave her. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. "Me too." They lay in silence after that, the weight of his grief settling over them like another blanket. Mara felt something shift inside her, a crack in the wall she'd spent so long building. She didn't know this man. She didn't know him anything. But for the first time in years, she felt the urge to give something anyway. "My father died when I was 16, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Heart attack. I was the one who found him." Arlen turned his head slightly, just enough to look at her. "After that, I decided I'd never let myself need anyone again," she continued. "If you don't need people, they can't hurt you when they leave. So I built a company, built a life, made myself untouchable." "Did it work?" Arland asked. Mara thought about the question, thought about her penthouse apartment that felt like a museum, thought about the boardroom where people feared her, but no one knew her, thought about the nights she went home and realized she hadn't spoken to anyone about anything real in months. "No," she said. It didn't. The wind screamed outside, rattling the windows. The fire burned low, and in the small, cold cabin, 2 broken people lay side by side, sharing warmth and grief and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, surviving the night was enough. Hours passed. Mara's shaking finally stopped. The warmth seeped back into her body, slow and steady. She could feel Arland beside her, still tense, still careful, but present. Real. Human. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yeah." "Why did you really pull me out? You could have driven past, called someone, let them handle it." Arland was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "Because I was too late for her. And I couldn't be too late again." Mara closed her eyes, something twisting in her chest. She didn't have words for what she was feeling. Gratitude, maybe. Or guilt. Or something else entirely. So she did the only thing she could think of. She reached out slowly and rested her hand on his arm. He didn't pull away. They stayed like that as the storm raged on, 2 strangers finding something like comfort in the space between survival and surrender. And for the first time in years, Mara Lennox let herself be vulnerable, not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. By dawn, the worst of the storm had passed, but the cold remained brutal. Mara woke first, disoriented, her body stiff and sore. Arland was still beside her, asleep finally, his face softer in rest than it had been awake. She studied him for a moment, this man who'd saved her life for reasons that had nothing to do with her. Then she heard it, a faint sound outside. An engine, maybe. Or voices. Arland's eyes snapped open. He sat up immediately, alert in a way that suggested he'd never really been asleep at all. He moved to the window and looked out. "Search and rescue," he said. Relief flooded through Mara, sharp and immediate. They were going to be okay. They were going to get out of here. But as Arland turned back to look at her, something in his expression made her chest tighten. Because she realized, with sudden clarity, that getting out meant going back. Back to her life. Back to her company. Back to the cold, untouchable world she'd built. And she wasn't sure she wanted to anymore. The rescue team arrived with thermal blankets and questions Mara didn't want to answer. 2 paramedics, a sheriff's deputy, and a volunteer firefighter who looked too young to be out in weather like this. They assessed her quickly, vitals stable, possible concussion, mild hypothermia, and insisted she go to the hospital for observation. She didn't argue. Arguing required energy she didn't have. Arland spoke to the deputy in low tones near the door, gesturing toward the embankment, where the SUV still sat buried in snow. The deputy nodded, scribbling notes on a pad that was already damp from the cold. Through the open door, Mara could see the world outside, white and brutal and unforgiving. 48 hours ago, she would have seen it as just another obstacle. Now it looked like something else. A reminder, maybe. That control was an illusion, and survival was never guaranteed. They loaded her into the back of an ambulance, and she caught Arland's eye one last time before the doors closed. He stood near his truck, hands shoved in his pockets. Watching. She wanted to say something. Thank you, maybe. Or I'm sorry. Or I don't know what happens next. But the doors shut and the moment passed. The hospital was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers stood out. They put her in a private room, ran tests, and confirmed what Arland had already told her: concussion, bruising, minor frostbite on her toes. Nothing that wouldn't heal. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, told her she was lucky. Mara didn't feel lucky. She felt hollow. They kept her overnight for observation. She spent the hours staring at the ceiling, replaying the past 2 days in her mind. The crash. The cabin. The way Arland had looked at her when she'd admitted she didn't know how to be weak. The warmth of his arm under her hand. She'd spent years perfecting the art of not needing anyone, and in one night, a stranger had dismantled everything she thought she knew about herself. By morning, they cleared her to leave. Her assistant, Davis, arrived with a change of clothes and a rental car. He looked relieved to see her alive, though he was too professional to say it outright. "The board's been calling nonstop," he said as they walked to the parking lot. "They want to know when you'll be back." "Soon," Mara said automatically. But the word felt wrong in her mouth, like a lie she was telling herself. She returned to the city 3 days later. Her penthouse apartment was exactly as she'd left it, immaculate, sterile, empty. She stood in the living room, looking out at the skyline, and felt nothing. The view that used to make her feel powerful now just made her feel small. Work didn't help. She threw herself into meetings and reports and strategy sessions, but everything felt distant, like she was watching her own life through a window. Her team noticed. Davis asked if she was feeling all right. She told him she was fine. He didn't believe her, but he didn't push. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The bruises faded. The headaches stopped. But the hollow feeling remained, growing larger every day, until it felt like it might swallow her whole. She thought about Arland more than she should have. Wondered if he was okay. Wondered if he thought about that night at all, or if he'd already moved on, filed it away as just another thing he'd survived. She told herself it didn't matter. They were from different worlds. The cabin had been an anomaly, a moment outside of time. Going back would be foolish, but she couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said, because I was too late for her, and I couldn't be too late again. On a Tuesday afternoon, Mara left the office early. She didn't tell Davis where she was going. She just got in her car and drove. The mountain looked different in daylight, without the storm. The roads were clear now, sunlight glinting off snow that had turned crystalline and beautiful. She found the turnoff to the cabin almost by instinct, though she had to park at the main road and walk the last half-mile. Her boots crunched through the snow, and her breath came out in white clouds. The cabin looked smaller than she remembered. Quieter. Arland's truck wasn't there. She stood on the porch for a long time, debating whether to leave. When she heard an engine behind her, she turned. Arland's truck rolled to a stop, and he climbed out slowly, his expression unreadable. He wore the same worn flannel, the same exhaustion in his eyes. But there was something else there too. Surprise, maybe? Or wariness. "Mara," he said, her name sounding strange in his voice. "I should have called first," she said. "Don't have a phone up here." She nodded, suddenly unsure why she'd come. What was she supposed to say? that she couldn't stop thinking about him, that the cabin had changed something in her she didn't know how to name. Arland walked up the porch steps, stopping a few feet away. "You okay?" "Physically, yes." "And the other way?" She looked at him, at the way he was watching her, like he could see straight through the walls she'd spent years building. "I don't know," she admitted. He nodded, like that was the answer he'd expected. "You want to come in?" The cabin was cold, but not freezing. Arland started a fire while Mara stood near the door, her hands shoved in her coat pockets. When the flames caught, he straightened and looked at her. "Why'd you come back?" he asked. "I wanted to thank you. Properly." "You already did." "No, I didn't." She took a breath. "You saved my life. And I don't just mean pulling me out of the car. She struggled to find the words. "You reminded me what it feels like to be human. I'd forgotten." Arlen's expression softened slightly. "You didn't forget. You just buried it." "Maybe." She looked around the cabin, at the bed, where they'd shared warmth and grief. "I've spent my whole life building walls. After my father died, I told myself I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me again. And it worked. For a long time, it worked. But then you..." She stopped, shook her head. "You didn't ask for anything. You didn't want anything. You just helped because it was the right thing to do. And I didn't know people like that still existed." Arland was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. "I'm not a good person, Mara. I saved you because I was too scared to live with another ghost. That's not noble. That's selfish." "Maybe," she said, "but you still did it." The fire crackled between them. Outside, a bird called, sharp and clear. "I have a son," Arland said suddenly. "Rowan. He's 8. Lost his mom 3 years ago, and he's been the only thing keeping me going since. Some days I don't know if I'm doing it right. Most days I'm pretty sure I'm not. But I keep trying because he deserves someone who tries." Mara nodded slowly. "Can I meet him?" Arland looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. "Why?" "Because I want to know the person who matters most to you. Because I think..." She stopped, choosing her words carefully. "I think you've spent 3 years taking care of everyone else and forgetting to take care of yourself. And maybe I can't fix that, but I'd like to try." For a long moment, Arland didn't respond. Then slowly he nodded. "Okay." They drove back to his house in separate cars, Mara following his truck down winding roads that turned from snow-packed to plowed to almost normal. His house was small and comfortable, the kind of place that felt lived in. A tire swing hung from a tree in the front yard. A snowman, lopsided and melting, stood near the porch. Rowan met them at the door. He was small for 8, with dark hair and his father's serious eyes. He looked at Mara with the kind of scrutiny only children could manage, direct, unfiltered, assessing. "Who's she?" he asked Arland. "This is Mara. She's a friend." Rowan considered this. "You don't have friends." Arland's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I have Mrs. Callahan." "She doesn't count. She's old." Mara couldn't help it. She laughed. It surprised her. The sound, genuine and unexpected. Rowan grinned, pleased with himself. "You want hot chocolate?" the boy asked her. "I'd love some." They sat in the kitchen, the 3 of them, while Rowan told Mara about school and his favorite video game and the snow fort he was building in the backyard. Arland listened quietly, occasionally correcting details. And Mara found herself watching him more than the boy, the way his shoulders relaxed, the way something that had been tightly wound inside him seemed to loosen, just a little. When Rowan went outside to work on his fort, Arland and Mara stayed at the table. The silence between them was comfortable now, not heavy. "He's a good kid," Mara said. "Yeah, he is. You're doing it right, you know. The parenting thing. Arland looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. You think so? I know so. He nodded slowly, like he was trying to let himself believe it. Mara took a breath. I don't know what this is, what we're doing, but I'd like to keep trying, if that's okay. Arland met her eyes. Yeah, it's okay. They didn't make promises, didn't talk about the future or what came next. They just sat together in the kitchen, watching Rowan through the window as he packed snow with mittened hands, building something that would probably melt by next week, but mattered anyway. Mara thought about the cabin, about the way Arland had covered her with blankets and fed her soup and let her be weak without judgment, about the way she'd told him things she'd never told anyone. She thought about her penthouse apartment, cold and empty, and about this small kitchen that smelled like hot chocolate and felt like home. She didn't know if she could change, didn't know if she could unlearn 15 years of walls and armor and self-protection. But as she watched Arland stand and pour himself more coffee, as Rowan burst through the door demanding they come see his fort, she thought maybe she could try. And maybe that was enough. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and gentle this time. Not a storm, just weather, just life. And inside the small house at the edge of the mountain, two people who'd survived their own separate winter sat together, warming their hands on mismatched mugs, learning what it meant to let someone in. Sometimes, the kindest thing you could do was save someone. And sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was let yourself be saved. Mara Lennox was learning to do both.